purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 370, I call up the joint resolution HJR 72 making continuing appropriations for veterans benefits for fiscal year 2014 and for other purposes, and I ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the title of the joint resolution.
House Joint Resolution 72, joint resolution making continuing appropriations for veterans benefits for fiscal year 2014 and for other purposes.
Madam Speaker, the House is not in order.
The gentleman is correct. The House is not in order. If the members could please take your conversations off the floor. Pursuant to House Resolution 370, the joint resolution is considered read. The joint resolution shall be debatable for 30 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking member, minority member of the Committee on Appropriations.
Madam Speaker,
the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Culberson, and the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Bishop, each will control 15 minutes.
Madam Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized for his time.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on House Joint Resolution 72, and that I may include tabular material on the same.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. We bring before the House today, Madam Speaker, legislation that will ensure that our veterans are given the benefits that they have earned, that they don't, that there is no delay in the processing of disability claims, that
if the members in the rear would please take your conversations elsewhere. The House will be in order. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The other day, President Obama gave us a list of things that are important, that are vital that the nation do to make sure that there is no interruption in services. And in particular, we as a Congress, as a House, want to make sure that our veterans are taken care of. Everything that they have earned through their service to their country, we want to make certain is taken care of. So this legislation before us today is essential because the VA has told us that funds for these benefits will run out by the end of this month. So it's essential we pass this legislation right now. Although the Veterans Health Administration is funded a year in advance, we have to pass this legislation today, Madam Speaker, to ensure that veterans and their survivors receive disability compensation benefits. We have to pass this legislation today to make sure that 517,000 low-income veterans and their family members receive their pensions. We have to pass this legislation today unanimously so that 750,000 students will receive their post-9/11 GI education benefits. We need to pass this legislation today, Madam Speaker, so that 54,000 unemployed veterans will be able to be eligible for training assistance through the Veterans Retraining Assistance Program. And finally, Madam Speaker, we also have to make sure we get this legislation passed so that 67,000 veterans with service-connected disabilities receive their vocational rehabilitation and employment subsistence allowances. Finally, it's also important to note that this legislation will provide $223 million for cemetery headstones and burial plot allowances that our veterans, by their service to our nation, have earned. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 15 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. Here we are again, deja vu. All over again. The leadership on the other side of the aisle again attempting to distract the American people from looking at their cynical shutdown efforts by trying to hide them under the torn and shredded garments of our veterans. This is a hoax. This is a fraud. Simply stated, this bill will not provide enough funding for the Department of Veterans Affairs to pay for all of our veterans programs. Granted, every member of this House understands that veterans benefits are vital and crucial pieces of our ongoing obligation and commitment to our veterans. However, we should all be clear, and we should understand that in accepting this piecemeal proposal, We are, in fact, cutting $6.2 billion in funding that this body voted in June from the bill that we approved, 421 to 4. This proposed CR does not address, doesn't touch, or do anything for the remaining VA discretionary accounts, which are equally important to our veterans and their families. The Information Technology Account, which includes $155 million for the Veterans Benefits Management System and is vital to speeding up the claims process, not included. The Office of the Secretary Account, which includes the Board of Veterans Appeals, which provides decisions on claims appeals, not included. The National Cemetery Administration, not included, which means that burials, Madam Speaker, at the national cemeteries will be conducted on a reduced schedule. The Office of Inspector General account, not included, which means that audits and evaluations, administrative investigations, health care inspections, and Inspector General hotline will be suspended. The Medical Research account, not included. The construction accounts, not included. Grants to states' veterans' homes and the state cemeteries, not included. On June 4th, we passed a full bill, a complete bill, a bipartisan bill. We provided more resources for veterans in the bipartisan bill we passed in June than are provided in this anemic attempt to hide the cynical Republican efforts to justify a government shutdown underneath the veil of the service and sacrifice of generation after generation of veterans. This is shameful. Veterans can see through this hypocrisy. The American people can see through this hypocrisy. We need to end this lifeboat strategy offered by the senator from Texas, where the only visible functions of government he approves or sanctions will be opened. Open the entire government. Serve the American people by passing a clean resolution discharging our constitutional responsibility and voting down this phantom of a funding bill that does a disservice to our nation's heroes, our veterans. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Georgia reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, it's my privilege at this time to yield 3 minutes to the distinguished chairman of the Appropriations Committee, the gentleman from Kentucky, Chairman Rogers.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 3 minutes.
Madam Speaker, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yielding this time, and thank you for bringing out this bill, to which I rise in support. This bill continues to provide our nation's veterans with access to important benefits that they have earned in service to their country. To let these important health benefits slow or stop would be to renege on our promise to our soldiers that in exchange for taking care of this country, the nation will take care of you. This legislation continues funding for the processing and delivery of disability claims and other health benefits at the current annual rate of approximately $82 billion until December 15th, or until we enact full-year appropriations. Yesterday, when we considered this bill on the floor under suspension, Republicans and Democrats alike united behind the duty of this Congress to provide for our veterans. Frankly, I'm surprised it didn't pass with the vote of every single member. But some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle chose not to support the care of our former servicemen and women. But I believe that given this second chance, where a majority will do, my colleagues will come together once again to pass this important bill. Not only is it dearly important for the well-being of our veterans, but it's important for the well-being of the nation as a whole. Every step we take to fund one section of the government is a step that we can take toward reopening the entire government. Even if we do not agree on much, we can agree, Madam Speaker, that we can't allow this government shutdown to persist much longer and continue to inflict harm on the United States. The clearest path forward is coming together on a bipartisan and bicameral basis to work out our differences, find a solution, and end this shutdown. And the way to do that is laying right in front of us the House passed the other night a motion to go to conference with the Senate on the differences that we have between us. And the old time-honored tradition of the House and Senate having a conference together to work out differences is the way this place should be working. And yet the Senate refuses to sit down with us. Madam Speaker, our conferees are waiting at the table downstairs even as I speak. And if the Senate will just send over their conferees, we can work out the differences in the shutdown and solve the rest of the nation's problems. And with that, Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to provide for our veterans and help us get out of this shutdown disaster. Vote aye on this bill. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time I yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Lowy, ranking member of the Full Appropriations Committee.
The gentlelady from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, of course we support funding our veterans. The House already passed a full-year funding bill in June by a vote of 421 to 4, which was $6 billion more than the cheap ploy now being considered. It is essential that the VA can continue offering services, but we must also ensure that veterans receive job training, children receive immunizations, and that our food supply is safe. Radical Republicans have shut down the government because they refuse to allow a vote on a spending bill that they wrote. The Senate passed and the White House would sign. 3 days into the shutdown, the majority can't even tell us what they want to reopen the government. Just yesterday, one of their members said, quote, "We have to get something out of this, and I don't even know what that is," end quote. The House majority has shut down the government, but not to reduce spending or for some other policy reason. It is for pure petulance, and they don't even know what they are trying to accomplish. Ending the shutdown couldn't be more simple. Stop playing games. Allow a vote on the bill with your number to end the shutdown that the Senate passed and the President will sign. This could end 30 minutes. Just take the bill with your number, let it pass here, send it to the White House, and that's the end, and we can get on with business to serve the people that we were elected to help. My constituents want us to work on these serious issues, as do you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, the only question before the House tonight is will we unite to support our veterans? And I am pleased at this time to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Florida, the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, Mr. Miller of Florida.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise for the second time this week to talk about this particular piece of legislation. Why the second time? Well, because the Democrats banded together to kill this veterans funding bill once before. And as I mentioned before the Democrats moved to kill this veterans funding bill, we worked to ensure that disabled veterans, low-income veterans going to school on the GI Bill, the survivors of those killed in the line of duty continue to receive their benefits that they are due, the benefits that they in fact have earned. Madam Speaker, the House Democrats must not know that Bernie Sanders, the chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, introduced a bill on Monday night that related to veterans funding, and I'd like to share with everyone a bit about that effort. And I quote from press reports. Bernie Sanders, chairman, introduced legislation S-1564 Monday night and quickly got the backing from 4 other Democrats on the panel and the top Republican on the committee. Specifically, the bill would protect mandatory compensation and pension benefits for veterans and their families, including survivor benefits. It would also, among other things, continue money flowing to education programs for veterans. Can I get one more minute?
Gentleman's time has expired.
30 seconds. Additional 30 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized for 30
The bill
seconds.
he predicted would be passed in enough time to ensure that veteran benefits are not disrupted. Ranking Member Burr said he expects the Senate to adopt this legislation by unanimous consent. End quote. Does this sound familiar? It should, because this is the very piece of legislation that we're talking about on the floor today. And I have a suspicion why the Democrats keep stalling this veteran funding bill. They are playing politics. And I ask that Senate Majority Leader and my friends in the Democratic leadership to unite. Take up the bill that the ranking member has already said that fully funds veterans on June the 4th. And I yield back my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield at this time for unanimous consent to the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano.
The gentleman from California is recognized for a unanimous consent request.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, before I state my unanimous consent request,
The gentleman is recognized for unanimous consent only.
point of information, Madam Speaker.
Does the gentleman have a point of a parliamentary inquiry?
A point of information.
Parliamentary inquiry. The gentleman will state his inquiry.
Madam Speaker, what do the House Republicans
The
want to
gentleman
end
is
this
not.
shutdown?
The gentleman is not recognized
Because
for
I want
any
to know.
order. The gentleman is recognized only for a unanimous consent request. The gentleman is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent that the House bring up Senate Amendment to the House Joint Resolution 59, the Clean CR, to go to conference on a budget so that we can end this Republican government shutdown that is slowing our
The
economic
gentleman will
growth by 3%.
suspend. The gentleman, under guidelines consistently issued by successive speakers as recorded in Section 956 of the House Rules and Manual, the chair is constrained not to entertain the request unless it has been cleared by the bipartisan floor and committee leaderships. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? The gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Yes, I do. I'd like to yield for unanimous consent to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Vesey.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for a unanimous consent request.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the House bring up the Senate amendment to HJR 59, the Clean CR, and go to conference on a budget so that we end this Republican government shutdown
As the chair
that is
previous,
undermining
the
our
gentleman
national
will
security.
suspend. The gentleman will suspend. The gentleman is out of order. The gentleman will suspend. As the chair previously advised, the request cannot be entertained absent appropriate clearance. The gentleman from Georgia seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield for unanimous consent to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Barber.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for a unanimous consent request.
Madam Speaker, our service members and our veterans have done their duty.
As the gentleman will
steadfast in
suspend. The gentleman is out of order, and the gentleman will suspend. As the gentleman is not recognized, the gentleman will suspend. As the chair previously advised, that request cannot be entertained absent appropriate clearance. Don't lock it down. Emergency reasons. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield for unanimous consent from the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Clark.
The gentlelady from New York is recognized for a unanimous consent request.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the House bring up the Senate Amendment H.J. Res. 59, the Clean CR, and go to conference on the budget so that we can end the Republican government shutdown.
The gentlelady is out of order.
By preventing.
The gentlelady will suspend. As the chair previously advised, the gentlelady is not recognized. As the chair previously advised, That request cannot be entertained absent appropriate clearance.
Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Georgia seek recognition.
I do, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized.
I reserve my time. I reserve my time.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of time. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Rowe.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the chairman for recognizing me, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong support of this legislation.
If the gentleman would suspend, pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House will stand in recess, subject to the call of the chair.
The House is in recess, subject to the call of the chair. Apparently, shots have been fired in front of the Capitol building, so the House and all of the Capitol complex is on lockdown. We'll have more information on this as we get it. In the meantime, the House is in recess, subject to the call of the chair. We'll have live coverage of the House when members return here on C-SPAN. Earlier today, House Republicans held a briefing on the government shutdown. We will show that program to you right now.